A lot of my peers have been covering this story, and I want to give my 2 cents on it. Those of you who don't know what's going on, I'll fill you in. So, Alex Perez over at the Cosmic Circus did a Q&A from their Discord server and has given us some new insight into the upcoming Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars that are very, very interesting. And some of the clues here in this, Q&A are kind of going in a similar direction to where I thought they would go when it comes to He Who Remains, Kang the Conqueror, and Doctor Doom, but also there's some new surprises. So I want to go ahead and get into this right now with y'all. I want to go into some of these questions and then what Alex said and then my thoughts on it. Of course, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments below, but make sure you watch the entire video because we're going to go through a few of these. So you may have multiple points to make, in which case just number them and we'll go through. Of course, I may actually do one of those videos where I read your comments on a video, because the last one I did for John Cena and The Rock was very well received. And I like doing content like that. I just never get a chance to do it. Maybe I'll do more of it now. So iCast05 says, from the recently leaked concept art for Avengers, are there any that no longer hold out for the Russo's vision for these films? The whole thing about the recently leaked concept art is that there was some concept art that was leaked from a visual artist at Marvel, but the concept art, apparently it's real, but we don't know if that's existing concept art for what the Russos are going to do, or old stuff from what was happening prior to that, or if it's even going to matter, because when the movies actually start filming, I think next month they start filming, it'll change everything. So Alex says, I couldn't say with certainty because this preliminary pre-production stuff, or this is preliminary pre-production stuff. Most of the time, it'll get altered or updated later in pre-production. That's what I was saying. It's too early to tell. Or even during production. For example, some of the concept art is missing key characters meant to be in those scenes, but perhaps when they were made, they weren't considered. But overall, the general idea of those scenes is still happening. Not to mention that when it comes to concept art and all that stuff, a lot of times they will leave specific characters out to prevent leaks. Like when it comes to these MCU movies, they try their absolute best to prevent leaks by putting out incomplete information or sometimes even fake information. The Russos have gotten real good about that. Elise says, hi Alex, any idea what Doom's plans, motivations are for Doomsday? Now this is going to be very interesting because this goes right along with the 2015 Secret Wars story. Doom wants to stop the incursions from happening and stop the multiverse from entirely collapsing on itself. In a way, he's technically a hero in his eyes and in the eyes of his followers, kind of like how Thanos saw himself as the hero in Infinity War. Yeah, because he wants to... Stopping incursions is good, because you're saving billions and billions and billions of lives, but the way Doom does it might be questionable. I think people will have a better time processing this movie if they stop thinking of Doom as the ultimate villain meant to swap out Kang at the last minute, and more as the antagonist who thinks he's the hero and pissed that He Who Remains for essentially silencing his universe, as well as every other universe timeline that didn't correspond to the sacred timeline, and wants nothing more than to take the reins of his timeline and win his freedom. So this is the most interesting thing Alex said in this interview, in my opinion, because the fact that He Who Remains is being mentioned means that even though that there's rumors of Majors coming back, and even though Kang is out, they still want to have Kang as an integral character, and the events of He Who Remains are not just going to get forgotten about. So if you remember, I did a video maybe about a month and a half, maybe 2 months ago, where I discussed my theory about Kang and Doom. And my theory was that He Who Remains and Kang the Conqueror both are fearful of Doctor Doom. They're afraid of Doctor Doom, and they're afraid of Reed Richards. And the reason why they're afraid of Reed Richards and Doctor Doom is because Kang got his technology from them, first of all. We've already seen hints of that in the Ant-Man post-credit scene, matching with the Doctor Strange Fantastic Four scene, but also because there's fear there because of the knowledge that Doom and Reed Richards have of the multiverse. So Kang wants to keep Doom and Reed out. So when he creates his sacred timeline where everything is, in order and everything is the way that he wants it to be, he keeps Doom and Reed out. And that's an in-universe reason as to why we haven't seen the Fantastic Four or Doctor Doom in any of the main 616 Marvel MCU. They obviously are in other universes, but not the main one. Of course, with the events of Loki and He Who Remains no longer being in control. And we're going to go into more of that here in a minute, so bear with me. This is an opportunity now for Doom to come in, and basically he would be the one to take the place of He Who Remains. What we've got here is a situation where both He Who Remains and Doctor Doom think they're doing the right thing by manipulating the timelines to create the sacred timeline, right? Like their own sacred timeline, but they're doing very selfish things to keep them in power as well. They're playing God, essentially. We're not done. I have more to say on this. What element of that or original Kang Dynasty Secret Wars are you most disappointed to have lost in the new direction? Honestly, most of this stuff is still there, but I would have loved to have seen how Kang and Doctor Strange would have interacted. That would have been cool. And how Kang would have made fun of Strange for essentially messing around with time in such a primitive way. Which is talking about what he did in Infinity War where he used the Time Stone. I also wanted them to have He Who Remains come back and explain what he did during the multiversal war properly, because we didn't get the whole story. And that's true. The story that we saw at the end of Loki season 1 was not the entire story. It was the beginning of the origin story, but then Kang the Conqueror and the comments that he made in Ant-Man about his feud with the other Kangs, how he's going to burn them out of time. Clearly that Kang either is He Who Remains, just an earlier version of He Who Remains before he would become He Who Remains, or a Kang that's related to, or at least has a similar idea. You have to remember, and I always say this when I talk about these time travel multiversal stories, is when you're dealing with time travel, you're dealing with a lot of fourth dimensional thinking. So even if we see He Who Remains first on screen, that doesn't mean that later on we don't see an earlier version of He Who Remains before he would become He Who Remains. You understand what I'm saying? So a lot of people theorize that Kang the Conqueror and Ant-Man is the same exact guy that He Who Remains, and that he would eventually get his revenge with the second multiversal war and take control again. Now, again, that's a theory, and that might never be explained entirely at this point. He goes on to say, and I'm sure that when we see Ravonna again, so that's a revelation, she'll explain what happened. But I'd rather have had He Who Remains explain his perspective as to why the sacred timeline is the way it is, which goes back to my theory. That goes back to my theory about what I was, about like how Kang fears Reed and Victor. Like he fears them. Let's not forget that Reed Richards knows a lot about the multiverse and is one of the few minds who can stop Kang. You understand what I'm saying? Like, it makes perfect sense to me. Even in a time travel story, that character motivation makes sense. And we know that Ravonna Renslayer in one of the timelines was He Who Remains' I guess you could say wife or fiance. So her coming back would be good. I mean, if the rumor is true about Jonathan Majors coming back, then he might just do it himself. It all depends on what they do. Why did the MCU have to go to the storyline it did? Why did he remove such crucial characters like the Fantastic Four and the mutants from the panorama? Well, here's why he removed the mutants, because Franklin Richards is a mutant. And Franklin Richards can has reality warping abilities. See, again, that makes sense. He was probably afraid of mutation kicking in and having another Franklin Richards appear. Now, again, this is all in universe. The real explanation is because Fox had the rights to those properties for a long time. But this is a clever way to kind of canonize everything. And if they were originally meant to be a part of the timeline and removed from the sacred timeline, does that mean the timeline we have been seeing on screen for the past 15 years isn't the original version of our universe? Exactly. It's not. I don't think it is. I think in the original version, the man who has the face of Tony Stark, Robert Downey Jr.'s face, is Victor Von Doom. Like I said in my previous video, I don't think that Victor's a variant of Tony Stark. I think the Tony Stark that we got to know in Iron Man 1, and this is a huge retcon, but they could have it make sense, is a variant of the Victor that we got in that of the real Victor Von Doom. In other words, that's the real, he's supposed to be Doom. But my theory was that Kang swapped out babies at some point with the Starks, and that's why Tony Stark, which is really Victor Von Doom in the main timeline, grew up and was still a brilliant scientist. Remember what happened in Endgame? Who is the guy that figured out time travel? It was Tony Stark, because he still has that potential of a brilliant mind, that high IQ, because he is Doctor Doom. He just wasn't raised like Doctor Doom to hate Reed Richards and the thing that happened in his home country and all that. So it's that nature versus nurture. That would make perfect sense. At least I think it would. If you disagree, let me know in the comments. Some people might be pissed about that because then it's like, well, what does that mean for our Tony Stark? He's a fraud? No, it's just that Tony Stark came about because he was raised by Howard Stark and he had a connection to his mom and dad. And we know that because look how mad he got in Civil War when he found out what happened to his mom. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, he's a good guy, but he's still a super genius. And last of all, what future was Kang trying to avoid that forced him to create the sacred timeline so he could preserve its longevity? Was it Doom? Was it something more? We'll see how they adapt that and have it play out. That is so interesting. And there's more. We're not done. Elise says, anything about Loki's role in Doomsday Secret Wars? They're making it so that you have to see the Loki show. If you haven't seen the Loki show, I love Loki. It's my favorite Marvel live action show on Disney Plus. That and Daredevil. But I love that show, and I might actually watch it one more time before I go see Doomsday, so I can get like a full, recap. But man, I had a good time with that. He'll be our MacGuffin, Alex says. The race against Doomsday will be a race to see who gets to Loki first. So they're going to try and get to wherever Loki is at the end of time because he's the one holding together all the timelines, and obviously Doom might want to control that. Chance says, hello, Alex. It's always a pleasure to do these with you. I know that you said in the past that you're not for certain who the new Avengers are, but given that filming is next month, do you know who the new Avengers are? The new Avengers won't be formed 100% till Secret Wars. They're disbanded into many different groups, which won't come together until said movie. It's why they'll lose in Doomsday. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious they're doing a similar thing like Infinity War, where they will lose in Doomsday and then they'll come together in Secret Wars along with other variants. I'm hoping for a lot of variants here. Like, I really want the Secret Wars to feel like a real Secret War. So then the next question is, who are the main key players for Doomsday? Doom is at the top of that list, of course. The Fantastic Four, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, Captain America, Captain Marvel, Wong, and Bruce Banner are also on that list, along with a handful of mutants that I can't mention just yet. So this doesn't surprise me because the rumor going around for a long time is that the Fantastic Four are going to go to the 616 universe at the end of their movie with the multiversal arc that Reed Richards built. Obviously, Doctor Strange, being all cosmic, will be involved. Spider-Man's been rumored as being a a very important figure, and some have actually said that Spider-Man will be the new leader of the Avengers. So we'll see where that goes. And Wong, I mean, he's another Sorcerer Supreme. I'm actually surprised that Shang-Chi wasn't mentioned because I do think the bangles that Miss Marvel has and the 10 rings are gonna somehow factor into all of this. Radian Zonda, hey Alex, nice to see you back for doing another round of Q&A. We appreciate that. Thanks for all your work. Do you have any behind the scenes info regarding Doomsday as it's starting production a few weeks from now? That's a pretty basic question. Only that it's going to be in London and that they've already prepared a few sets. I've heard the Sanctum Sanctorum was a set piece being used, but that's all I got. Of course, a lot of it will be shot in probably in green screen or on a soundstage to avoid leaks. Greetings and salutations. Hope you're doing well. Any insight as to what character dynamics we can expect in Doomsday, character pairings, and all that jazz? Alex says, I've already teased Doom and Strange before in a previous Q&A, which is funny because in the comics, there's a lot of interesting stuff with those two. I think one I'm kind of looking forward to is seeing how Sam reacts to Bucky standing side by side with Walker. Yeah, the Thunderbolts. Something else I kind of want to see is how Monica's relationship with the alternate universe Maria, aka Binary, plays out. Yeah, because we saw that in the post-credit scene of the Marvels, and with Beast being there, I have a feeling Beast is going to be one of the mutants that's going to be involved. Like, obviously, I would assume Deadpool, Wolverine, Beast, maybe an Xavier variant will all be there. Hey Alex, thank you for doing this. Any truth to the rumor that the conceit of Doomsday is that Doom's origin will take on a what if Tony Stark was held in a cave with Victor Von Doom instead of Yinsen? I don't think that's what's going to happen. I have no comment, but personally, I think no. All right. So Diddy Dan says, hey Alex, longtime listener, first time caller. Well, it's not really a call, but I got it. Sort of a two-parter here. We know Avengers Doomsday has gone through a total creative overhaul, even down to the title change. Well, that happened before they even wrote the script, I would assume. My question is, was Secret Wars overhauled to the same extent? He says, I think a lot of people might be exaggerating the total overhaul thing. Yes, Kang and his council were removed from the film and switched out for Doom, and the way Doom gets introduced is also something new they had to work in. But ultimately, in the grand scheme of it all, it's still a very similar story being told. And that's that the remaining heroes of the remaining worlds of the multiverse have to find a way to save their own universe, and how they'd go about in doing that, even if it means the destruction of the other universes to save their own. I had a feeling that was the case. I do hope, though, that the Council of Kangs being the main villains is obviously been changed, but I do hope they at least have a scene in it if Majors comes back. It's too bad, but it is what it is. Okay, let's move on here. My questions are as follows. In your opinion, what are they going to be? Are there going to be any big differences with the deaths of characters in Doomsday Secret Wars compared to Infinity War Endgame? Not sure how to answer this question, other than it'll hurt a lot. Yeah, I know they're going to kill off a lot of people, and this time they might not come back. Like, they might not come back, but there's obviously the whole reboot thing. And then he says that the tone will be like Infinity War and Endgame, big blockbuster with a sense of dread lurking in the background. And that's good, because that's how it should be. So the last question I want to address, I don't want to go through every question. Some of them aren't that important. They're kind of repetitive. But I want to address the Phase 7 plans. So Tommy says, hey Alex, do you kind of see Secret Wars as sort of an ending of the MCU and everything that came before? Because that's been rumored that they're going to do a full reboot. And then he says, not in the slightest. It's not a full-on reboot. The idea was to essentially update the timeline universes into one where the Fantastic Four and X-Men characters exist. So basically, they're going to take the Fox universes and figure out a way to merge them and basically pluck out certain characters. So that would mean that we're going to get, obviously, we're going to get Hugh Jackman's Wolverine in there somewhere in the main, like, phase 7, and probably Deadpool, and probably the Fantastic Four that we see in the upcoming First Steps film, so that they're all going to be just in the main Marvel universe, and then the story will pick up from there. The question that I have, of course, is when they get to phase 7 is how are they going to be able to top this? Because, in phase 1, 2, and 3, the Infinity Saga was all about saving the universe from Thanos. I mean, that's what it ultimately became at the end of the day. And then the multiversal saga is the multiverse and all the different variants and all the different universes. How can that be topped? I'm not sure if they will, but for sure we're going to get mutants in the main Marvel MCU and a lot of reboots, young versions of the X-Men and maybe X-Force, other mutants, and we'll probably get multiple Fantastic Four films after that with that cast. So, really good interview. I am excited to see what they do with Doomsday and Secret Wars. Let me know in the comments what you think.